Mr. Rajagopal, I just want to thank you for your country visit to Uzbekistan. Can you please tell us about your position and your mission for those who don't know why you are here?
UN Special Rapporteurs are independent experts appointed for their expertise and independence by the UN Human Rights Council in Geneva. And they are functioning in their independent capacity and don't speak for part of the UN. And as one of their duties involves visiting countries in order to make an in-depth assessment of the particular human rights issue that they're dealing with. In my case, the right to adequate housing. I get to visit specific countries upon the invitation of those countries. And in this case, I came to Uzbekistan on the invitation of the government of Uzbekistan.
You have been traveling across Uzbekistan and you have been meeting with government officials, some victims, some activists. In a whole, what is the picture looks like?
Well, the picture is a mixed bag. On the one hand, I see a lot of good reforms, good laws and policies and many officials with good intentions. But there is a huge gap between what they wish to do and what they design on paper and what really the reality is on the ground. People sense very differently how the protection of the right to adequate housing is working out for them. And they don't have good news to share. Very often, there is a very large perception gap in terms of how, say, the urbanization process, which has been such a big part of the new approach to economic development in this country for some years, is working out. So that is my broad conclusion, that there is a difference between law on the books and law in action, and that there is a perception gap as a result between those who design policies and laws and those who are experiencing these effects of these laws.
I know that you initiated walkthrough at 7 a.m. in Samarkand to meet with some victims who is undergoing eviction. Can you please elaborate with whom you met along your journey in Uzbekistan?
Yes, I did meet with individuals who are unfortunately victims of forced evictions and demolitions, and some of whom are living without any homes. They're homeless. And yes, some of these individuals were in Samarkand too. And in particular, I was quite shocked to find this very old couple who are literally living in the rubble of their old building, essentially, and struggling amidst ruins all around them. They don't have access to water, they don't have access to sanitation, they don't have electricity, they are living a life which no one should live. And I believe that the way they have been treated, they're both very old people, is really undignified and should be addressed as soon as possible. I've also talked to other individuals, including some who have young children who have been threatened with eviction or have been evicted, and they're also living in extreme fear and anxiety. This, especially the sense of fear and anxiety, imposes a mental cost which is often not understood, I think, by those who sanction plans for clearing entire spaces where people are already living. And I've urged the government to pay closer attention to this in order to make sure that these kinds of incidents are lessened as much as possible.
During press conference, which we had earlier today, you divided your observation in three parts, which is firstly is absence of consultation with a member of public. Second is people cannot seek right judgment in a legal system. Also, what else you would add in this equation now?
Well, yes, clearly there is lack of consultation and participation in the urbanization process, including the formulation of the new master plans. There is a problem of lack of remedies when rights do get violated, lack of access to the courts, or the lack of adequate responses to resolve their problems when they file complaints to non-judicial mechanisms. But they also have the problem of a singular approach to urbanization. To imagine that urbanization essentially involves a particular way of transferring land to a different use that doesn't actually promote pluralistic, more multiple forms of imagining urbanization that is socially more inconsistent with human rights and environmentally more sustainable. Such forms of urbanization does exist around the world, and there are many models of that. And I've strongly encouraged the government to not think about urbanization as a cookie cutter or a standard format model. It can be many different models. Even within the same country, different cities should have the ability to try different approaches. And I hope that becomes possible.
My last take would be, destroying cultural heritage, which you have already touched in a press conference. How Uzbekistan government could develop or do urbanization, they not harming historical and cultural heritage?
That's a very important question, not only with regard to historic cities like Samarkand or Bukhara, but also many other locations which also have historic properties and historic centers. The key issue is to ensure that those areas that are under protected status, because they're part of a World Heritage Site designated by UNESCO, remain protected, that they are not easily converted to commercial use, and the homes and other buildings there are not destroyed at the drop of a hat. And this is the first requirement. The second requirement is also to imagine urbanization in these areas as one that actually builds on the strength of the historic core area, rather than seeing urbanization as one that will also interpenetrate the core area. So physically, that means that, for example, the core area can be the space around which further developments can happen as you go farther away from the protected areas, especially with regard to vertical growth, large, tall buildings. But this is not always consistently done. The other issue I would say about historic building is that impact of development has to be also front and center at a time like this, particularly social impacts. Due diligence in terms of human rights impacts is very important. Due diligence in terms of environmental impacts is very important. I've seen, for example, in developments like Shirin in Samarkand, that no proper environmental and social assessment was done, although the entire site is based on a riverbed, and many environmental irregularities were pointed out by competent academics and architects in that area. So I'm very concerned about kind of what one could see as a runaway approach to urbanization. Urbanization doesn't have to be fast simply for the sake of being fast. If you're too fast but you're not meeting the adequate minimum standards to make it socially responsible and environmentally acceptable, then it becomes a catastrophe. There is an end of mission statement that we have already released to the media today, and that contains a summary of my initial conclusions and some recommendations already. But in the coming months, I'll be processing much of the information and impressions that I gathered here in the form of a report. It will be shared with the government, and after input from them, I will present that report in March of next year to the UN Human Rights Council. Now, the presentation of the report and the country visit themselves are only the initial engagement. I hope to remain continuously with to engage with the government and the people of Uzbekistan and to work with them to create a roadmap which they have offered for implementation of my recommendations. So I hope that happens and I can stay engaged.